Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square, and welcome to a special edition of First Draft, where I talk with authors and journalists about their important work and the stories behind them. My guest today is Tara McGowan, who is the publisher and founder of Courier Newsroom, and she is no stranger to Lincoln Square. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Always happy to see you, Susan. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, before we jump into what you're doing over at Courier and some of the stories that you've been covering on your podcast and your newsletter, I did have to ask you about the latest news with another firing in the Trump administration. Were you surprised at all that it was Pam Bondi, or did you have any money on this?
I did not have any money on this. I have not, nor do I plan to make any bets on the poly markets, Kalshi markets, what have you. Don Jr. needs none of my money. I'm not incredibly surprised. I am delighted. I think that every single firing out of this administration is a win and is the result of extraordinary pressure that's being placed on the administration for this cover up and for the atrocities out of the administration. So I'll take all of them. I do think it's noteworthy that the only two folks from the administration that have been fired so far are women. I don't know that that is a coincidence, but they're not great women, in my opinion, especially AG Bondi. So, I think that there is momentum there. I hear all of the comments and the sort of the chatter online about, Todd is no better. No one who they put in that role is going to be better. But it is admission of failure and weakness in certain ways. And that's really important because we do have to take every win we can and build from that momentum to try to have more accountability. I also saw that the House Oversight Committee is not going to let her firing get her out of appearing before the committee and testifying under oath, which was scheduled and continues to be scheduled for the 14th. So I look forward to that happening still.
I think that's such an important point because right now, Republicans control both houses of Congress. Obviously, Trump has taken executive power to a whole new level. And so one of the things that I think was really difficult, especially in year one, maybe until that first No Kings protest, was just this feeling of helplessness and that there was no accountability. And the fact that Kristi Noem has been fired, Pam Bondi has been fired, that is an acknowledgement from Trump that his agenda is not going over well. And obviously his inclination is to find scapegoats. And to your point, I think it's not a coincidence that the first two firings were women. But we do have to take these wins. And it is a sign that Trump, for all of his bluster about how he's invincible and he's basically a king, he's still responding to public pressure. He's not immune to it.
That's exactly right, because he does not admit failure and has not, right? I mean, if you look at all of his cabinet secretaries, right, all of them have done fireable offenses. All of them have been complicit in cover-ups and corruption. And so it's unusual for him to admit that things are not going well and kind of show this weakness. And it is really important. That said, we know that they were implementing his strategy,
right?
His wishes, right? So, I always wonder about anyone that thinks that they are going to benefit from taking direction from Trump when it's been clear to all of us, anyone paying attention for years and years and years, that he's only there to serve himself and his interests. And so you are collateral damage, right? You are there to be used to enact his desires and his wishes. And the second that you don't make him look good or you flail publicly, you will be tossed aside. And, it's not sad to me, but it's a little sad that some of the reports of Pam Bondi, right, was that she begged him to not fire her. And I'm just so confused about what these folks think, that they are invincible when he is the only one who really believes that he is.
Right. You're always useful to Trump until you're not.
Exactly.
And now there's been speculation about who might be next in the administration. Do you have, and what are your thoughts on that? Because as you pointed out, everybody has done fireable offenses. So there's no shortage of people it could be.
Yeah, I definitely believe that Pete Hegseth is desperately trying to keep his job. I think, you know, he should have been the first one to go with Signalgate. To be honest, I know that there are folks that are leaking that, you know, he is really counting on the war in Iran as the vehicle through which he keeps his role. But there's also reports that he may have tried to place bets or be able to benefit financially from his own decisions and leadership in the I refuse to call it the Department of War, the Department of Defense. And also, you know, it was just breaking news last night that he fired his chief military official as well. So there's definitely chaos in the Department of Defense. And so I think that that's something that's really important for reporters and folks paying attention to stay on that story as well, because it seems as though he is flailing and feels very desperate and vulnerable. So that's a good sign.
Right. And of course, the war in Iran is not going well by any stretch of the imagination. The Strait of Hormuz is still effectively closed. Oil prices have jumped. Gas prices are up over $1 since before the war began. And tragically, we just lost another plane, and we're searching for the service members. So we've already, you know, had fatalities and injuries over there. And so true to Trump's form, I don't think any of us would be surprised if Pete Hegseth pays the price for the war not going well.
That's right. Excuse my language, but it's been a shit show from the beginning. Somewhat by design. There was never a strategy. It was not something the American people wanted. The president had no idea what he was doing, how he would get out of it. He just kept talking about and continues to talk about just bombing more things. I mean, it really is the worst nightmare, right? That we all knew would come to pass if he were put back in office.
Right. I did want to talk with you about what you are doing at Courier Newsroom. Obviously, we're big fans of what you do. And currently you are in, it's 11 states, am I correct?
Right.
But you are expanding to 20 this year, a critical midterm election year. But can you talk with us about the states that you are expanding in and what your goals have been in doing these state-based newsrooms?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're so excited. It is a big growth spurt for us. Courier turns 7 years old this June. It has always been mine and the team's intention and hopes that Courier could be in all 50 states and U.S. territories. It's a very scalable model. There is obviously a need for good, factual, and values-driven local reporting everywhere in this country. And our model remains really unique in the value that we provide to communities by meeting folks where they are with free local reporting that really resonates with their lives, that isn't trapped behind paywalls or reported and written for elite audiences like so much journalism is today. So we're very excited about the opportunity with our growth and really a testament to the team's incredible work these past 7 years that we have this opportunity to expand into 20 states this year. And hopefully, you know, that just brings us closer to getting to those 50 states over the next coming years. So the states are, I mean, at this stage, right, we want to be everywhere. So it's a mix of states that are blue, red, purple, you name it. There's not, you know, a political bias there in what states we're going in. We really do want to be everywhere. But of course, this is a massively critical election year, as they all are now. But especially when it comes to just where the electorate is generally, I am very much of the belief that everything is on the map. We're seeing incredible enthusiasm and turnout for Democrats in special elections and elections that Trump won by double digits across the country. I'm currently sitting in Louisiana, where I spend time every year, and there were races here that Democrats have won by double digits. So it's just really, really, really important that there are media operations and networks like ours that are reaching folks and giving them reporting not just about what's happening in the federal government and how it impacts them, which we of course do, but what's happening in their state houses, right? And especially when it comes to the elections coming up, election security, making sure that folks feel safe and empowered and mobilized to turn out and vote when we know the dumb foolery out of this administration, trying to prevent that, making sure that folks are really engaged with their communities, as well as mobilized in protests beyond just voting, to be participating as so many folks feel angry, alarmed, and helpless. We really feel that we can connect the dots for folks to feel a part of this movement against this regime. So we're very excited about it. We're going to be launching newsrooms over the next few months in Georgia, Colorado, Kentucky, Nebraska, Minnesota, California, and New York are going to have newsrooms. And, we're going to start fairly small, but really intend to grow and expand across all of these states over time. And so it's really exciting. It's very busy. The team is very excited about it. We're rapidly recruiting and hiring. So if you know folks in these states, you can go to courierlocal.com, apply for jobs, share it with friends and family that live in these expansion states so we can hit the ground running.
That's great. Well, I've spent a lot of my career in journalism covering state politics in the Midwest. And it's interesting. Obviously, we've all seen the media landscape has, shrunk quite a bit, especially for local outlets. And so there are many news deserts. Another issue that I don't think gets talked about a lot in media is that even in some of these states where you do have a pretty robust press corps, like Michigan, the state I live in, sometimes you kind of get tunnel vision where you cover a lot that's going on in your state house. We have a full-time legislature here, so there's plenty to cover, but we're not disconnected from what happens in Washington. Obviously, with the impact of this administration in particular, where Trump is withholding funds from blue states that, overriding what Congress did, and taking such a heavy-handed approach, like with his latest executive order to try and ban, mail-in ballots in some form, that has huge impacts on what's going on in the states. And so I've always been fascinated by the balance that Courier strikes, because you do have national reporters and you do keep an eye on what's going on in Washington and how that impacts states. But at the same time, trying to make sure that your reporters are really of the community and do keep their eye on what's going on locally. Can you talk with us? Because that is a hard balance.
It is. And I mean, the entire origin story and model for Courier is about filling that local news vacuum in these communities. And of course, as you know, there are not many, if any, sustainable business models for journalism today that don't rely largely, increasingly on philanthropy, right? Even public radio and public broadcast lost their federal funding. That's now being contested, which is great. Court ordered that was illegal for the Trump administration to do that, but that funding hasn't been restored. So that is at the heart of everything we do. So even with these expansion states, it's identifying reporters. I wish it were harder in certain ways, right? As you know well, because there's not that many jobs in local journalism across the country today. So we are often flooded with applicants and resumes when we roll out these new newsrooms and roles, which is, it's a bittersweet thing, but it means that there really is a competitive landscape for folks there. But they need to come from the communities they're going to serve. They are the ones who are going to determine what and understand what matters most to those communities. And so, yes, we do want to bring in some of that national political reporting and expertise, but always in the context of how it impacts, for instance, Michiganders or Minnesotans or Georgians, right? So that's just front and center. Our newsroom in Michigan, as you know well, the Gander, Kyle Kaminsky, our political reporter there, has this phenomenal series that has really taken off on social media called So What Michigan. And every week he breaks down something that's happening in Michigan politics for folks that aren't necessarily paying attention, right? They don't know who their state legislator is, et cetera. He follows the money backing certain candidates and campaigns. And it's a perfect example of what we really strive to do, which is to connect people who don't have the time or the luxury to be proactively looking for political news or paying for it in their states, to know what's going on and how it impacts them directly. And I think that our reporters do a really tremendous job of that. And they do it in this decentralized media ecosystem, right? It's not long-winded articles or jargon-filled headlines. It really is talking directly to constituents and citizens about what's happening, and then engaging with them in the comment threads, through the email newsletter responses. So it's really, the team does a phenomenal job, but that's because they come from the communities they're serving and really understand those nuances.
And I know another approach that Courier takes is a social first approach to news, which is different than, the vast majority of newsrooms. But you don't need to look at all the surveys, but they're there. It's harder and harder to reach people, and people are getting their news from so many different places. Certainly not most people are checking out the CBS Evening News anymore, probably for all sorts of reasons. Yeah. But this was long before Barry Weiss took over. Are you finding success with reaching a younger audience and reaching people who may not be regular news consumers?
Very much so. I mean, that's exactly why I started Courier. I actually started my career at CBS Evening News 20 plus years ago. And I saw what was coming pretty early on, in the sense that legacy media, whether they were broadcast, cable, or even digital, were not understanding how social media was really exploding our consumption habits, our attention, how it's focused, right? And it's continued to change so much. So that was baked into my strategy for Courier from day one, was that this news organization needed to start by understanding audience consumption habits today and be nimble, knowing that new platforms would come and go, which they have since I started Courier. TikTok did not exist when I started Courier. And now it is one of the most powerful distribution platforms. I don't know how long that will last, now that the Ellisons have taken it over, as they've taken over CBS and turned it into a full Trump propaganda network. And so that's been core to our model from the beginning. I would say it was more difficult in the beginning to get buy-in. There's an education curve among philanthropists, donors, financiers, right? But also reporters. It was very difficult in the beginning. We had to train traditional print reporters to become influencers, to be the faces and the voices breaking down complex issues for TikTok and Instagram, like I mentioned Kyle does. That is no longer the case. I feel like now, right, there's not a lot of jobs in traditional media, full stop, and yet younger generations, millennial and Gen Z, and coming up behind Gen Z, they are digital natives. They have been producing content since very little children. Like, they understand we don't have to do that teaching anymore. They are more teaching us when we bring on younger folks into the network. And so we will always remain nimble. And really, the other piece is, we provide a great service, I believe, to really outstanding traditional reporters and news outlets that we don't see ourselves as competitive with. I know you used to work at the State Newsroom Network, and there's such phenomenal journalism in some of these places, and it's not reaching audiences because they might not have that social media expertise or social first approach we do. So we think it's really important that we are also aggregating and citing and sourcing other great journalism for our audiences, with that special touch of making the headline graphics, making the explainer videos very digestible. And so we call it our media aggregate program, but we do that for free, just to make sure that that great reporting is still reaching the audiences that aren't looking for it on their own, and maybe it's not coming across their feeds because the strategy is different out of those newsrooms.
Right. I think for decades there has been a lot of consternation on the left about how do you build media infrastructure to rival what the right wing has done so successfully. And they've transitioned very well to this digital age. There are all sorts of influencers on TikTok that are often spreading misinformation, but in a very effective way. And certainly there have been scandals about foreign governments like Russia that are providing funding, which is always a problem, on the left side of the political spectrum. You have kind of taken this problem on head on with Courier, but I'm sure that it was a challenge, to get the funding and to get the buy-in for this. At the same time, I'm curious, I see a lot of hostility from traditional media sometimes about progressive news outlets where they're saying, well, you're biased and I can't really trust your reporting. And, there seems to be some competition there, even if that is not your intention. Do you feel like some of those walls are being broken down because of the good work that your reporters are doing? Or is this still kind of a rub, especially in maybe some states and not in others?
Oh, I don't see it as a rub very much at all anymore. 10 years ago when I set out to start Courier, before we even launched our first newsrooms, and through the first year or two of Courier, and folks will find this on the internet if they search for it. But we were getting arrows on all sides from Democrats, from traditional media and journalists. I was attacked all the time for this. Folks were, very pearl clutchy, if you will, including on the left about this, saying that, we don't want to fight fire with fire, or, partisan political media is bad. And we are not partisan, nor have we ever been. That has been the biggest, bee in my bonnet of all the attacks. Truly was that I have always been called somebody that is doing the bidding of the Democratic Party. I built my first organization and Courier because I feel like the Democratic Party actually has been abysmal at communications and understanding how to actually reach even their own supporters, never mind the vast majority of Americans who share their values and who they seek to represent. And also, the party has never supported Courier in any way, shape, or form. If you look at right-wing media, the vast majority of their advertisers are the RNC, the Republican senatorial campaign, the campaigns themselves. That's not the case. We've never had a dollar in advertising support from the Democratic Party, and not for lack of trying. And we don't do their bidding, but that just goes to show how far behind they still are at understanding where people and consumption habits are. Because the other thing is, I think that we were ahead of the curve in the broader pro-democracy space, but to your point, not how the right wing understands media, in the sense that objectivity was always an illusion. And today, the reason that so few people trust the media, it's complex, right? There have been targeted attacks to make people not trust it by the right and Trump himself. But also, people don't believe you if you tell them you don't stand for anything. And actually, trust is built when you're very transparent about your positions, your experience, your background. And we have been transparent from day one about our values and our positions on key issues at Courier. And then people get to decide. And we have thousands of Republicans and independents that read our newsletters at the state network every single day, that follow our social media. And I think that's on account of the phenomenal journalism and transparency that we bring. Our reporters have also won in-state press awards in almost all of our existing newsrooms. That's completely a credit to their journalism and their integrity. So those sort of criticisms, they're way farther and fewer between now than they were in the beginning, and they were never fair, in my opinion.
Yes, and I know obviously on your podcast and in your own newsletter, a recurring theme for you is how Democrats can message better and, some constructive criticism, to say the least. Talk with us about that. I know you had a really fascinating conversation with Jennifer Welch from the I Had It podcast not too long ago. I'm really curious in this critical election year, what you feel Democrats are doing right, what they need to improve on, and what the real contours of the fight are right now.
Yeah, it's exactly why I started Gloves Off. I obviously am busy running the network and expanding it, but I felt that it was important for us to have more female voices in the broader left. There's a lot of pod bros, which are great. I'm friends with many of them, but I think that's important. Jennifer Welch is obviously one of them. She's everywhere now. I've Had It is a phenomenal podcast, but she has built this following, and others have as well, by being really, really, really bold brass and no bullshit, both about the authoritarians and the idiots on the right, as well as the folks that are deeply out of touch on the left with where the electorate is, where the American people are. And so I think that's really important, because this is not a new debate in the quote unquote big tent, Susan, but we're seeing it really, really ratchet up again, as it tends to do in election cycles, between the quote unquote centrists or moderate flank of the pro-democracy left-leaning movement and the progressive flank. Third Way is out there trying to, smear Hassan Piker, who's built a really, really powerful and influential following, especially among younger men, a demographic that has been really challenging for Democrats in recent elections. And we've seen this all play out before, and I think that it's easy to get mired in sort of the political or ideological debates, which I think are actually very important, and that those are good debates to be having about policy and ideology and things of that nature. But what's more concerning to me is the tactical sort of understanding here. It's like, if you want to build coalitions and support for specific candidates and ideas and positions, you need to understand how to actually get your message across. And I'm talking about the candidates themselves, the committees, et cetera. If you are deeply out of touch with where folks are, and I actually just had this conversation in a Gloves Off that drops early next week with my friend Charlie Goldenson, who's a creator himself as well. But it just feels like there are so many folks in the Democratic Party that are so out of touch and really do believe in this kind of controlling perspective, where if they're upset that an idea or a creator who's more to the left of them is really influential or powerful, they don't have a strategy on offense to reach people in the similar way. They sort of cut them down. And Jennifer Welch and I talked about this as well. It's like, you need to actually build support and build up creators and voices that understand how to build communities and active audiences on platforms like Twitch and TikTok, et cetera. And just chastising the ones who've done it really well. Haven't done it on your own, it's ludicrous to me. And I think that that's different than the actual ideological or policy debates these people are having. They don't seem to understand how to actually build audience or community or engagement in this media environment. And that's where they will fall short. And you can also translate that to a lot of the committees and the leadership in the party, who are, upset and they are endorsing candidates that are truly out of touch with where a lot of the Democratic base is today. So these are really important arguments and debates, but I also worry they're a huge distraction from the common enemy and threat that we all need to be unified against. And primary season is always silly season in certain ways, but it's an important season too, because it's where the most engaged voters have a really outsized say in the direction of the party. And the party needs a rebrand, and it needs a reset in a really big way. And that's going to be determined by the voters, not the party leaders.
Yeah, and I know we need to let you go within a minute or two, but it seems like we've seen a pattern in some of these midterm elections where Democrats have come together in 2018, surprisingly, even in 2022 when Biden was president, but just given the overreach of Republicans, the backlash to January 6th, I think, and the overturning of the Roe v. Wade decision by the Supreme Court. Uh, Surprisingly, in midterms, Democrats have been very good about working together, and even though there are ideological differences, uniting around the fact that the alternative is too much of a risk. But then when we get to the presidential elections, things get very tight. And I feel like some of those divisions within the Democratic Party really start rearing their heads and working against the party, like we saw in 2024, where there was a huge divide over the war in Gaza. And that was probably determinative in some of the swing states. And so how do we have these healthy debates that a party needs to have and that people on the left need to have, while making sure that you do keep your eye on the ball of the biggest enemy we have right now, which is Donald Trump?
I mean, it's such a good question. It's a loaded question. I wish I had the solution for it. I mean, my perspective is such that like, if we want a democracy, you have to be willing to have a democracy, right? Which is the folks, it's do all of the things to inform all of the people, but the people get to decide the direction of the country. That's what a true functional democracy is. And I think there are some folks in the Democratic Party that don't actually believe in practice and democracy. They want command and control over the direction of the party. They want to protect certain status quo systems and interests that do not benefit the majority of American people. And the American people are not dumb. And a lot of the Democratic base is onto this. And so that's why we see things, the most powerful bipartisan issues right now, right, come down to the Epstein files and the war in Iran and things of this nature. And a lot of the fights within the big Democratic tent are actually about protecting some of the interests that the American people do not want to protect, regardless of party. So I think that we're experiencing a really, really, really important and long overdue inflection point. And I do believe that so many of these systems that have been upheld by Democrats and Democratic presidents and administrations in the past that are breaking down right now, that are being disassembled and destroyed by the current administration, they had to go. This is not how we would have wanted them to be dismantled by any means, but I do think that it provides a really powerful opportunity for new leaders, folks that people probably can't name yet, to rise to this moment and to be able to bring with them a new vision, not just for the Democratic Party or progressive movement, but for our democratic institutions and a system that actually works for the people and by the people. And once again, I think we're overdue for that. And that's what the mass majority of this country is going to demand. It's how Trump got put into office as a very disruptive change agent. I think that we're going to see that again, but hopefully it will be someone who has a real vision for a different way of governance that has absolutely no tolerance for corruption at any level. And that's not really how the Democratic Party has operated.
Tara, thank you for spending so much time with us. Can you tell us the best way that people can find your work?
Sure. Thank you, Susan. As I mentioned, courierlocal.com to let folks know about our newsrooms and the expanding ones. Gloves Off, you can listen to anywhere you get podcasts or on Courier's YouTube. And I'm an Instagram girly as a millennial. So Tara McGowan, RI, on Instagram is where I am most responsive to DMs. But really appreciate always our conversation, Susan.
Thank you so much.